Welcome, Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred Podcast. To say I'm excited about this episode today would be an understatement. I'd like to say I've known Eric my whole life, but I've only known him in a short amount of time. Like a lot of my new friends I've met on social media, which has been, especially LinkedIn, has been amazing for me, Eric, and I'm sure for you. You know, you've opened up a lot of doors as well. Full disclosure, what we're going to talk about today, I have zero experience in. Absolutely zero. Yet, as a mental health advocate, somebody who has buried two loved ones close to my heart, I'm tired of people dying. I'm tired of people being unhappy in their lives, and I'm tired of people quitting. So, Eric, I'm all hands on deck. I'm so excited about some of the alternative areas of mental health. Research, I guess I'll call it, but I can't really say research because it's been going on for a long, long time. What we're going to talk about today. You're in Louisville, and you are the minister and president of Sanctuary Church. Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. And I want to just applaud you off the bat for acknowledging that you have no experience with this topic. There are so many people in this world right now, in this field, who are presenting themselves as experts or at least knowledgeable. And you get to talking with them and find out they have no experience, and everything that they're communicating is based on what they've read.
Right.
And so I really appreciate that you acknowledge that and bring that out.
Yeah, the interest is for people who are interested, what is Sanctuary Church? You're located in Louisville, Kentucky, and your expertise or your area of why I wanted you on the show today is pretty wide range, but we're just going to throw out the word that most people can probably get accustomed to, and that's psychedelics. I like to say plant-based medicine. I'm sure that you prefer that as well. If you go back thousands of years, the indigenous people have been using plant-based medicine, just in normal aspects of life. It wasn't anything odd for them. It was just, normal, part of the earth, Mother Nature providing something. I guess as we progressed, especially into the 70s and 80s, we had this war on drugs. We had this whole just disastrous way that we approach these things. And I think a lot of really good research on psychedelics kind of got buried, got shoved off.
Oh, yeah.
And there seems to be a resurgence. It seems like every day, Eric, I see an athlete. Aaron Rodgers talks about his ayahuasca retreats. Movie stars, famous people, billionaires. But that's not the reason that my interest isn't because of other people doing it. It's more of the fact that there are areas of mental health that I have absolutely no knowledge in, and that piques my interest. And so I wanted to get you on the show. It seems to be what you do every day. Why don't you kind of speak as if you're speaking to people that really don't have any idea what you're talking about? As my dad used to say, talk in human terms. Because I think this plant-based medicine has some footing in society today. So let's talk a little bit about what this is to you, why you do what you do, and a little bit how this renaissance and this resurgence can help people get through the tough times that they're going through.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much that we could explore here, and just to kind of make a distinction, while I do certainly put a preference on plant-based psychedelics, fully recognize that synthetic compounds like LSD, MDMA, 2CB have some incredible applications, and that they are equally valid as medicines. But what I think the plants do most effectively is really connect us back to, I want to say spirit, I want to say nature, I want to just say this ineffable, wherever it is that we come from. I have a dog behind me who has a bit of an issue, so if you hear him burping in the background, that's what it is.
We've had stranger things happen on this show, so.
So I think that's ultimately what, specifically mushrooms, that's my specialty. I've been working in the field of mycology for 29 years almost now, and have been specifically focused on psilocybin for about 17 years. I've treated well over 1,000 people, and have myself worked with the medicine a lot. And I think that ultimately what it does is it reconnects us with ourself. So much of our, I believe, mental health crisis is at root of spiritual health crisis. And so to be able to reconnect with the mystery is where the healing comes from. And that's what the research is showing us as well, right? The clinical work shows that the more profound of a mystical experience that is had in a psychedelic session, then the longer the healing persists.
Yeah, I like the way you say mystical and spiritual, because I think there's, I think I told you on our pre-interview, Eric, is that I'm agnostic. So what agnosticism is, for people who aren't real clear, that just means I'm basically willing to concede I have yet to experience anything that would convince me that there is or isn't a God. So I just
well, that whole term, the term God, has just
right.
It's so loaded with so much historical baggage,
folklore and mythology. Yep.
Exactly. So, I mean, I consider myself agnostic as well. The I don't
Right.
know. I don't know, and none of us do. And I think that's one of the important, pieces to bring in this conversation that really isn't very often, even in the psychedelic world, is we don't know what's going on. Like we can get closer and closer to answers, or we can get answers that bring us closer to an understanding, but we will never be able to wrap our heads around this mystery.
Yeah,
and that's so important.
I guess what really just irritates the heck out of me, Eric, and again I'm not pro psychedelics. I've never done this stuff, so I'm probably the perfect one to be an advocate or someone interested in this, because I don't have a dog in the hunt. But to me, it's pretty clear what we're doing isn't working. It's pretty clear that the way we've looked at things for the last 100 years has not worked. And if it has been working, then let's see the reams of evidence. Let's see the statistics of overdose deaths dropping down. Let's see the statistics of suicides dropping down. Let's see the statistics of alcohol abuse and alcohol deaths dropping down. Let's see the statistics of Gen Z that has no anxiety, no stress in their life. And it's almost comical that everything is on the other way around. All the statistics are just massively demonstrating that the ways we were looking at these things are not working. I'm not saying they're wrong or right. I'm just saying they're not working. And so if we just keep continuing what we're doing, giving our kids Adderall, sending them to see more therapists, telling them to turn off their phones, things that just hasn't worked. I just don't think we can expect the numbers to get better. So that leads me into psychedelic research. And then the other area, kind of the frontier, is the brainwave technology, specifically TMS, MERT technology. There's a lot of technology out there that has piqued my interest in regards to ways we can identify in adolescents and young kids brainwave patterns that could maybe tell us that they're predisposed to have alcoholism or predisposed to have anxiety. So it's like, why wouldn't we be interested? So that brings up a question I want to ask you. That was more of a statement I just said instead of a question to you. Okay, let's talk about the obvious problem. Is a lot of states, most states, this stuff's illegal. So how do you get past this without having to fly to Costa Rica?
Yeah, wow.
A loaded question, right?
It's just tough. It's tough, and I find myself in a difficult position here at times, because this has been since I was, I don't even know, 17 or 18 years old, when I first was exposed to cannabis after a life of being convinced that it was this devil's weed or this dangerous plant. And then growing up in bourbon country, Maker's Mark distillery is right down the road from where I grew up, right? And that's what everybody did. And so I smoked some cannabis, and I was like, this is great. And this is not at all what they told me. And then, so I became very early on an advocate for plants, and that there is zero justification for plants being illegal. And despite being arrested for psilocybin in 2015 myself, I just kind of have walked in a world where I don't buy that. You cannot tell me that a plant is illegal, and I'm not going to abide by that. So I don't want to necessarily encourage anyone to live the life that I have lived, because it has caused some challenge, Now, what we've done with Sanctuary, so just a little bit of backstory for your audience to understand where this is coming from. I started the first psilocybin mushroom retreat in the world. It was in Jamaica in 2013. I just bootstrapped a retreat center that treated people for just severe trauma, anxiety, depression, and have just
This
really
was in
been
13?
in that world for 2013.
Okay. And I guess I'll let you finish, but what piqued your interest to do this? Because this is a pretty big risk, because you're not very old, so you had to have been pretty young then.
I was 30
Yeah.
something. I'm 45. I'll be 45 this year. Anyway, mushrooms, I had a mushroom farm, gourmet mushroom farm, and was growing 15 or so varieties for local restaurants. And I had long had personal experience with psilocybin, that, I gradually increased my exposure and practice with psilocybin until 2009. 99 was my first experience with psilocybin. In 2009, I started the farm, and I finally had the ability to grow mushrooms kind of on a bigger scale. I'd always grown my own psilocybin since I even kind of got entered that world. I just knew that this was for me. And so I started growing my own mushrooms, and then in 2009 kind of took it to the next level and started working with friends in my community,
Right.
on underground. And in 2011, there were a couple of mushroom experiences that I had where it came, information was transmitted to me very clearly that you are going to do this. I was already going to Jamaica. I had friends down there, and just had a deep love for the island and the culture, and knew that psilocybin was unregulated. And it came into me in a mushroom trip where this was directed for you to do. And I resisted it for quite some time because it was such a huge undertaking. Right. And it just, every time I would commune with the mushroom, it would just pin me to the ground and say, this is what you're doing, and we're going to have this conversation until you accept. So I finally accepted. And then I decided that if I was going to take on this enormous responsibility of dosing strangers in a foreign land, that I was going to have to get some real practice under my belt. Because the thing about psilocybin that's not really being portrayed is how variable the experience can be. You can take a mushrooms 100 times and you will have 100 different experiences, and a certain percentage of those will be terrifying, and a certain percentage of those will be blissful, and a certain percentage will be mundane, or so it's so variable. And so I decided, if I was going to do this, then I was going to just step up my practice. And for the entire year of 2012, every new moon and full moon, I did 5 to 10 grams of psilocybin by myself out in the wilderness. And it was a real training ground. It was a real boot camp, if you will. And then in 13, we officially started Myco Meditations. I hosted the first retreat there. And it kind of, it grew slowly by word of mouth. I was still doing underground work here in the States, and someone reported us. And in 2015, we were arrested. And so after that, my master's degree was basically worthless, with 3 felonies. And I just put everything that I had into the Jamaica retreats, knowing that this was the future of spiritual and mental health. I just knew that, because it's the past. It's what sustained us in the past. So it has to be what holds us in the future. That's has been my belief anyway.
Yeah.
So
I just admire your courage, man, in the face of a lot of things. You just had a belief structure. And I think that passion is what drives a lot of us entrepreneurs. I'm in the midst of that myself, at 56, being in the investment business my whole life. And now I'm, the founder of a startup company on mental health. It's like, where's the crossover there? But I embrace it. I'm really excited about it. I think the risk is in not doing it,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I could not live my life and not do what I'm meant to do. And I think that's one of the big takeaways. Over the years, people have come to me and been inspired, and then they want to kind of follow suit. And I always try to communicate, like, I know that it seems like the mushroom is the thing, but it's my thing, not just my thing, but you probably have some other inspiration of yours, so people have a tendency to see passionate people and then think that their passion is where it's at.
Right.
But where it's at is your passion, whatever that
is. That's a great,
and that's been.
I'm happy you said that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's a really good point.
That's fine.
Because do you think, like, psilocybin and mushrooms in general, and I want you in a minute explain exactly what this does to the mind, what psilocybin does in simple terms, but do you think it unlocks something in us that's already there, or does it does it put something in us that isn't there?
No, it's just showing us what's already there, 100%. And that's why if you have a difficult trip, it's trying to show you something that's there. You're carrying some kind of baggage around.
Part of the process,
in your
right?
daily
A
life.
difficult trip is like recovery.
Exactly.
It's like falling off the wagon. It's part of the process.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Oh God, yeah. And I've worked with a lot of folks in recovery and have seen some really interesting stuff and how people will come to the mushroom, have profound experiences, be determined that they're never going to drink again, and then fall off the wagon, if you will, and have a real bad relapse. And that ends up being the most helpful thing that could have happened, because they had that powerful mushroom experience where they saw clearly the outcome of their actions, and then they fall back into an old pattern, and it just smacks them twice as hard. And it's done it to me as well, So to highlight that healing is a process. It very rarely is instantaneous, all-inclusive, right?
100%. Yeah. So in simple terms, a naive person like me, what happens in the brain? What happens in the body? In like I said, in the simplest terms, what happens in the mind? Why does this mushroom, why does this plant-based thing unlock something inside of us? And why can't we do that with other things? Or maybe we can.
Yeah, well, we definitely can. And I think in simplest terms, I would say the honest God's truth is we don't know, right? We know parts of it, but here's the reality: is that we know that psilocybin is a serotonin analog, so it fits into serotonin receptors. It has a preference for the 5-HT2A receptor, but all of our studies have been focused on psilocybin's activity in the brain, and we have more serotonin receptors in our gut and our heart than we do in our brain.
Yep.
Right. So we're still kind of have I believe a pretty myopic perspective on what's going on. But even that little bit that we're getting is incredibly complicated. I mean, we do know the prefrontal cortex blood flow is limited there, which is an information filter. We're surrounded by billions of bytes of information all the time. And this prefrontal cortex, one of its roles is to kind of filter that information so that we're not overwhelmed. And when you limit the blood flow, the activity in that portion of the brain, then you actually receive more information. There's other stuff going on too, and firing across the hemispheres. There's some stuff that happens in the amygdala. There's a lot going on, basically. But the main activity is limited activity in the prefrontal cortex in terms of the brain.
What's your thoughts, aside from the legality? Let's say this stuff's legal everywhere in the world. Is there a specific age that probably should not be used? I mean, I know the prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed till 25, or they keep moving it up. I think it was 24 a decade ago. Now it's like 25 or 26. Is there a certain age that these things shouldn't be probably used, or is that like it's really up to the user? It's up to each individual. One 18-year-old can be substantially different than another 18-year-old. I just didn't know what your thoughts are on that. Aside from the legality part, let's just take that off the table.
Right. I mean, it is a very individual experience and approach that should be taken. But I will say that for this technology, that we have lost 95% of our information around, due to colonialism and all the outfall of his Catholic. It was the Catholics. I was born and raised Catholic. I'm not criticizing Catholics per se.
It's okay.
But,
you can do whatever you want on the show.
Well, I mean, I definitely want to be inclusive, but I also want to, speak to the truth of what happened. And that was that the Spanish conquistadors came over here and they saw the Mesoamericans, the South Americans using mushrooms in particular, and said that they were talking to demons, and then, use that as part of their basis to, destroy that population. So we lost tons of information about these plants, and we're, again, coming at it from a very Western materialistic mindset. So we're getting a limited perspective. And what I would say is that these traditional cultures would administer psilocybin as early as age 8. In some cultures that use ayahuasca, they would actually put some of the ayahuasca tea on the mother's nipple before the child had its first nursing, right? To immediately bring them into the culture. We know that toxicologically, psilocybin is exceedingly safe. We know that there is no system in the body that it has any negative impact on, period. I have a 19-year-old son who had a very traumatic upbringing, an alcoholic mother and whatnot. And I dosed him at 14, and he's dosed probably 10 times since then, and it has saved his life. It's absolutely saved his life. I know that. He says that. He's very involved in our church now. It's just turned his life around. So I've also worked with 15, 16-year-olds with their parents, being there with us, who were autistic or who had migraines, and every single one of those individuals found relief. So, it's might cause some waves to say that I think that it's okay to dose a 13 or 14-year-old, but I don't really care. I've got a book on my shelf here, Acid Dream. There was it was fully documented. There was research in the United States in the 40s giving self-mutilating nonverbal autistic children exceedingly high doses of LSD, like 1,000 micrograms, which is 10x the dose, a regular dose. And these children went into complete remission, could communicate, became non-self-mutilating, and all of that research was destroyed. So there is substantial historical and even clinical evidence that shows clearly that psychedelics are safe. Safe in the right circumstances. I think it's also really important, though, to make a distinction, because something else that I find problematic is that a whole host of psychotropics are being lumped into the category of psychedelics. MDMA and ketamine, for instance, are the two primary examples.
Yeah, ketamine's getting very popular now, at least in verbiage.
Yeah,
you hear it all the time.
And it's done a lot of good, but it is habit forming. It's not actually a psychedelic. And MDMA, the same way, is very powerful. It has a lot of great applications, but it can be habit forming. It's not a classic psychedelic. It does not have anywhere near the same safety profile as psilocybin or LSD. So I think that's important to note. And I do want to go back, though, if we can talk about access, because that's been my mission, is to help expand access to this plant, to this medicine. So, we did the retreats in Jamaica, and for my taste, the work there became a little too close to clinical. The people that were coming there, they saw us as a therapeutic center, which it was, and I purposely put that face forward because we wanted to be as open to as many people as possible. But this has always been a spiritual experience for me. And so in Jamaica, I found myself the luxury, really, of helping scientists and philosophers and some incredible individuals, high level business people, kind of step into spirituality. Because that is almost invariably, if you continue working with the mushroom, it's going to present you with the mystery. And that's the doorstep of spirituality, right? So what we did with Jamaica, it kind of started, like I said, it started to feel like it just was moving away from how I believe that this is best practiced. I truly believe that the best practice for psychedelics is within a spiritual container. And so we moved back to America, my wife and kids and I, and we started Sanctuary Church, which is a sacred mushroom church. We stand and maintain that psilocybin mushrooms are a sacrament and that it is our constitutional right to use them. And so far, that's held up, not just in our community. We have over 200 members nationwide, but there are multiple instances where plant-based psychedelics have held up at state level Supreme Court and even federal Supreme Court. So not only are we seeing a real drastic shift in our understanding and exposure to psychedelics in a clinical sense, I think we are going to see psychedelics just drastically change the religious landscape in the United States for the better.
Wow, a lot. I have so many roads we can go down on that comment. Not even sure where to start. Okay, so I think what bodes well for this whole industry you're talking about is a couple things. One, I used to be an investment advisor. That was my career. So I like to follow the money. There is a lot of money going into this area. Some pretty big name. Peter Thiel is an individual who's a hedge fund manager. I think he was with Merrill Lynch, if I remember right. He's got a vested interest or put a lot of money into Compass Pathways, for example, is a company out there. I'm not recommending any of these companies. They're just coming to my head. And there is a lot of money going into this research. I think a lot of smart people see that, kind of like 10 years ago, and when cannabis went from zero to now half the country has it legal. And you can get, even in Iowa here, you can get the CBD creams, you can get the drops under your tongue. So, I mean, this stuff's coming. You can fight it. You can put your head in the sand. And like I said, if things were getting better on the other side, I would say we don't probably need to even go down these roads. But there's a fine line there, man. There's a real fine line. I think it's pretty clear that, there is this stigma with these things as being gateway drugs, and maybe it's legitimate, man. I mean, but I think there's a lot of gateway everything. I mean, you look at sugar, you look at caffeine,
I was gonna say,
you look at alcohol. I mean, we could play that game forever. And I say we, as I'm not an advocate of psychedelics. Don't get me wrong there. I'm saying we as an open-minded human, we can play that game forever. If you want to talk about gateway stuff, it starts at a very young age. Cell phones can be a gateway to things. So, going back to the war on drugs, have you seen Johann Hari's movie out called The Fix? Do you know who Johann Hari is? Okay.
No.
He is, arguably one of the biggest, most well-known. I'm not sure what I'd put him in. I'd say addiction experts. I don't know what his clinical background is, but his TED Talk has been viewed one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time. And he came up with the phrase that the opposite of addiction was connection, human connectivity.
Right.
His new documentary out called The Fix. It's like 9-10 minute little videos. It's actually narrated by Samuel L. Jackson. So that does add some credibility to his documentary, at least from a voice standpoint. It sounds good. But he starts off with, and I've read his book, Chasing the Scream, which is all about.
Okay. I thought I knew.
All about the war on drugs. And this is coming from somebody, like I said, again, I'm not an advocate on these things. I'm just open-minded. But the war on drugs has been a colossal failure on many, many fronts. I don't think I could get too many people in here that could show me evidence where the war on drugs has worked. No. You'd have to probably nitpick. But so how far did that set us back, or how far did that set our society back in regards to understanding plant-based medicine? It just had to have been disastrous in setting us back.
Yeah, who's to say, right? I mean, that's the thing, is that psychedelics can accelerate healing so drastically that it's hard to even imagine where we would be as a society if we had been incorporating these tools for the last 60 years. It's a tragedy. I mean, my family was they were ringleaders in the cornbread mafia. It was the largest U.S. cannabis grow operation ever, busted anyway. And we lost tons of land. My uncles, died very shortly after spending most of their adult lives in prison.
Wow.
And that's just a piece of the story. There are millions of human beings who have been caged like animals for plants.
It's highly discriminating too. A lot more African Americans. If you look, especially marijuana, just pot. People sitting in there for 10, 15 years is
there's a guy in Texas.
Itself.
Yeah, there was a guy in Texas. I can't remember. I used to know his name, but he was arrested for a joint. A black man arrested for a joint and was convicted to life in prison for one cannabis. Was it
because it was like 3 strikes or something, or just some ridiculous?
Probably that's probably like his.
We there's so many things we need to do to be more compassionate for people who are using these things for pain management or treatment for people who have addiction issues. I'm all for that. Yeah,
and I'm going to say recreation too, right? Yeah. I mean, here's the deal. Recreating ourselves is part of our life's purpose. We are meant to be changing. We are meant to actually enjoy this life. And these tools, that's one of the most profound aspects of healing that occurs. If I could tell you the number of times that I have worked with people who had, they came to me with severe depression and they spent 6 hours laughing in just hilarity, and they came out and that was the medicine that they needed, was to just have a good time, to let go of spooky? All the baggage.
Why are we so afraid of these things, or why is society trying to make us afraid of these things?
Well, a big part of that is the war on drugs, and I truly believe that an aspect of the war on drugs was to keep us pitted against each other, right? There's those scary brown and black people, and there's these, and so I really believe that there was a systematic suppression of the unifying force that is psychedelics. Look at the 1960s and what was happening when psychedelics were really widespread. People were coming together, protesting war, and really kind of coming up, in unity. And like I think that's worth taking note of. So it amazes me. You just mentioned Adderall to children, because
don't get me going on that, man. That started my whole son's demise, was giving Adderall to him because of something as ridiculous as attention deficit, which I have. I've never been medicated. It makes my blood boil.
Oh, it's infuriating.
Yeah, it is.
It's infuriating. There's no doubt. But how many millions of parents are convinced that this is the right thing because the doctor with the white coat handed down from the pharmaceutical company that's lobbying the government?
Well, Eric, there's more adults on Adderall than kids today.
Really?
Adderall is prescribed more to adults than children today. Adult Adderall. And then kids are stealing it from their mom and dad's medicine cabinets and taking it to school and selling it for $20 a pill or whatever. And so they created this market, and the drug dealers see this. So now they create, fake Adderall, and then they put fentanyl in it to addict. I mean, so it's there's like this cause and effect. But yeah, again, somebody watching this can validate this, but I had an expert once tell me that there's more Adderall. And now there's an Adderall shortage in the United States. You heard that. Prescribing too much of it. It's just insane.
I honestly,
it gets me so mad.
I've checked out of the pharmaceutical world as much as possible.
Good for you.
And yeah, it's just heartbreaking. It's criminal, but it goes to show how pervasive ideology can be when it comes down from this top-down authoritarian model, right? And that's the beautiful thing about these plants, is that we as individuals can take power for our own healing. Now, I think it's always important to point out that psilocybin, again, is extremely unpredictable, and that if you are even relatively experienced, you still want to have someone there with you. This is not something to just flippantly do. That's I think that's a problem that we're seeing coming out of this research that, in all honesty, is cherry picked. They're picking subjects that will produce certain results. And like, I'm not criticizing, but that's just a reality. And so you have all these people that are hearing, oh, psilocybin can do this. This is how psilocybin works, when it's such an unpredictable treatment or experience. And so having someone there with you who is highly experienced is extremely valuable.
Let's talk about set and setting. You hear that a lot in this context. But I also want to say meditation's the same way, man. It's different for everybody. It's you're obviously not taking anything when you meditate, but there's people that do it with music. Some do it silent. Some do it open-eyed. Some do it closed. Some do it with incense. Some do it with guided meditation. The experience in meditation is unique to every single. There's no two people who have the same experience meditating.
But likewise, when meditation first was starting to be taught publicly here in the U.S., it was, this is how you meditate, right? Like, this is how you do it. When that's just not, that's not how it works.
Well, Jeff, what's the best advice you would give me? Because they couldn't meditate. And I said, have no expectations. Have zero. Go into it with literally the intent to observe. That's it. And I have never done psychedelics, but that those days are numbered. I mean, I'm so interested in this, and I'm going to go into it in completely open-minded. I'm not going into it have anything fixed. I'm not going in to escape anything. I'm not going in it to explore anything. I'm going to let my body and my mind and my subconscious or my conscious, whatever you want to call it, guide me into where this is going to take me. And I'm really excited about it. But again, I want to have the set and setting. I want to do it in a legal environment. I want to have people that are around me that are supportive. And I just see this convergence of that addition to my life being positive. Am I afraid?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Alcohol has an effect on everybody. I mean, like I said, we could play this game forever. I mean, my dad's a doctor, and he's not supporting, all this stuff, but he says, alcohol has done more damage to society than cannabis ever could and ever would.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never smoked pot. So it's like, but again, that shouldn't preclude me from being open-minded, especially if things were getting better.
Well, you've got the right mindset already going into this experience. And I would say that if you take mushrooms 1,000 times, that is the mindset to have consistently
Right.
going in. And even as a facilitator, I do often dose alongside the people that I'm facilitating for. And that's a whole big other topic that a lot of people don't really understand. That is how it was traditionally done. And I do have a very clear reason and purpose behind doing that. But even then, whenever I go into a mushroom experience, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just here. I'm just showing up. This is the time. Let's see where it goes. So as far as set mindset goes, I think that is really the most effective mindset to have. You can go in with a little more direction, and very often I work with people who have very specific things that they're working on, and we'll spend a lot of time kind of talking about that and consciously and subconsciously preparing ourselves to really have that information in front of us. That's about the best you can do, though, is just set yourself up to have whatever it is that you want to address kind of there at the forefront of your mind.
Shouldn't we be about choices? Shouldn't we be about letting the individual decide in the context of safety, obviously? Let them decide what tools they want to use to build their best mental health. And if you go back to let's talk about fentanyl. And I have a dog in the hunt. My son died from fentanyl. So I feel qualified to talk about this. Obviously, the initial reaction is fentanyl is the problem. Let's get it off the streets. Let's blah, blah, blah. And I'm all for that part. But if you go back to why fentanyl is even on the market in the first place, you go back to a lot of the, for example, let's just use the opioid prescription issue for a while here, and then I'll go into alcohol for a minute. But Johann Hari talks about this a lot. And so, I'm not the only one that has these thoughts. But, back when Purdue Pharmaceutical was handing out OxyContin like it was M&Ms, and the movie Dope Sick will certainly educate you on that. Yeah, it's a great movie. The initial reaction from experts was, let's cut down the prescriptions for these things, and thus less prescriptions of Oxy on the street, less people will die, right? And that's the naivety of cause and effect. That's what people think, it's linear. So what they did is they cut down prescriptions by like 60%. So doctors just, stopped prescribing as much Oxy as they had in the past, okay? Deaths went up 100%. And then what happened was that people didn't realize that people that need legitimate pain management and people that are addicted, okay, they're going through withdrawals. The withdrawal part of all the addiction is something people don't talk about. It's not just that I want it; it's that I can't be off it. My body just starts to, eat itself literally. It can be a big problem at withdrawals. Right. And so, what do we do if you still need this for legitimate pain management, or you're addicted and they cut the amount of it in half? You're going to find it. You're going to go to the street. It creates a demand. It creates a demand out there. Drug dealers saw this. So they started adding fentanyl to these drugs to increase the potency. Because as Johann Hari said, and this makes complete sense, why the pills and why everything out there is stronger today, mainly is because it is illegal. But if you go back to Prohibition, and let's say you and I have a still and we're hauling, cases of beer around to people, okay? And now they come in and say it's illegal. Well, now having a truck full of cases of beer doesn't make any sense. I have to have half the amount and twice the strength, right? So I go into whiskey and bourbon. It's smaller. I can sell it. It's more potent. And that's the same damn thing going on with drugs today.
Yeah.
They're smaller, they're more potent, and they're more effective. The problem is that potency is an alcohol, it's fentanyl. And I watched that documentary and I thought, there is something in this story that's not being told. And that's why, as a mental health advocate, I am so on the demand side of this issue. I'm so on less on the supply side and more on the demand side. Prohibition, if that hasn't taught us one thing, making things illegal or incarcerating people for selling things, just seems to have not worked. I just don't know how clear I can be about that. It's like, duh. At some point you just go, okay, that's the problem. But, go try to get elected at the local city council running on that platform. or your school board, try to get elected there. You can't. There's just too much
It's going to shift,
naivety
though.
out there.
I think it will shift. Every law makes an outlaw. That's what I just keep coming to. And, as I mentioned on the phone, my son nearly died from fentanyl. He was in a coma for 3 days, and it was just barely hanging on. So, again, my heart goes out to you and everybody that's lost someone in this war on drugs, because that is who the real victims of the war on drugs are. It's not the cartels. It's not the fucking dealers. It's the everyday human beings who are dying because they either have become addicted to a substance that was made because it was illegal, right, and it became appealing, or it was prescribed. And, it just goes on and on. And it just, I don't know, other than just by doing what we're doing. And that's why I've just done what I've done, because something has to change, and there has to be some people who stand up and say no more. I've been entertaining the idea of running for political office in some way in the next cycle, just to be a psychedelic practitioner who is out there publicly advocating and waving that banner. Right. It's crucial. It's crucial. We just had so many people die, and when so many lives could be saved. Even when I was arrested, I'm in jail for a week with meth and heroin addicts, and I'm sitting there with these people thinking, the thing that I was arrested for is more criminal than what they were arrested for. I was looking at a 30-year sentence for mushrooms, right? And what I was arrested for could have saved the lives of the people that I was in jail with.
Yeah. And again, people that follow my story and see this podcast, I may lose followers over this. I may lose people that are interested in some of my initiatives, but, I've lost a son, I've lost a wife over these issues. So, I'm not going to say I don't care if somebody unfollows me, or somebody wants to say, hey, how can this dad be out there semi-promoting these things that killed his son? And I'm like, oh, I don't think that's necessarily what killed my son. My son died from fentanyl. I get that. Mm-hmm. But it started with Adderall, and that was prescribed by a doctor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So where do we go? We go to the ending or to go to the beginning? He maybe never gets to fentanyl if he's not given Adderall. So where do you want to start? I mean, and again, I have a vested interest in this. I don't have a business I'm trying to promote. I don't have, if anything, I've lost money on this journey. I've been a mental health advocate. Most of what I've done has been in my own pocket. I haven't raised much money in my nonprofit at all. People aren't putting their money where their mouth is. I am. And people that, like you, that have a passion on these things. I guess where I'm going with this is I am open to any way we can keep people alive, improve their lives, give them a little more happiness and peace, alleviate some pain, whether it's physical or mental pain. And if you go back from just a medical perspective, it wasn't too long ago we were doing electroshock therapy on people. We were doing lobotomies,
we still are
cutting them up, and just now we laugh at it. Well, I think in 20 years we're going to look back at some things we do today and laugh at it as well.
Oh my God!
Don't you think?
Yeah, no. I think we'll cry over a lot of the stuff that we've
especially
done,
to our children,
especially
to our children.
Yeah, to our children, 100%. 100. I mean, how many lights have been snuffed out? I taught middle school for about 7 years, and I would see children who were hyperactive. They were just kids. They were kids, and then you see them go on medication, and they become a completely different human being. The light gets snuffed out, and that's what I love about psychedelics, is that particularly the plant-based psychedelics, they reignite that flame, and that's what we're.
My dad always said, Eric. My dad's a doctor. He's 90 years old. He's one of the most intelligent, caring human beings I've ever met. He was talking about attention deficit when I was a young kid. He said, you can't put it in him, but you can take it out of him. He's talking about the hyperactivity, the intensity, the lack of focus, or as I like to say, I'm freaking very focused. I just get distracted easily. I'm like a pit bull. If you put me on a project, I'm in it until the door knocks, and then I'm gone. So it's like, I think people that have attention deficit, it's a spectrum. We aren't presenting it as that. We're presenting it as a problem or not a problem. And that
Yeah.
just, again,
We
gets me so angry that little Eric over here in 5th grade has this thing called attention deficit disorder, but little Jeffy here doesn't. So Eric is abnormal because that's why we call it disorder. Because a disorder, if everyone had attention deficit disorder, we wouldn't call it a disorder, right? We just
Right.
call it part of being human. And so we have to call it a
Again,
disorder to make it a diagnosis.
Yeah. No, and I think it's worth looking back again at traditional societies those who had these peculiarities, if you will, were often the ones who became the healers.
The most
right?
creative people in society, Elon Musk. You go back and forth and look at people that have slight levels of autism or attention deficit or are not normal by all sense of purposes. They seem to be some of the most creative and most impactful humans that we've ever seen.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I know we're running out of time here, but the last thing I think is really worth touching on is that this polarity that you're speaking of, in terms of the black and white, it's either this or that, is an endemic problem in our culture that I think also psychedelics will help move the needle on, because we see everybody from every political persuasion, every religious persuasion is coming to psychedelics because they need help, and there's nothing that's actually doing it. So the potential for psilocybin and other psychedelics, particularly plant-based, to heal culture on just multiple levels is really completely untapped, and we're just starting to see the beginning of that.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I am not endorsing anything that we talked about today. I'm endorsing having an open mind. That's what I'm endorsing. Anybody that is going to be doing these things, my suggestion is reach out to people like Eric, reach out to people that have done thousands of these, I hate to call them trips, but thousands of these experiences, and make an educated decision that's best for you. Consult with your own doctor if you want. I guess that's the position I'm taking today. And that's why I was really excited about getting you on the show, Eric, because you're adding a different angle to the Living Undeterred podcast and to what we talk about daily. But it's something that I have an interest in, and I have a right to learn as much as I can about this stuff so I can make my own choices on my own mental health.
Yes.
And that's really what it comes down to. I don't want someone telling me that I can't explore these things because it's not legal in my state. Certainly, I don't want to break the law. So I'll just go somewhere where it is legal and have these conversations and talk to these people. So,
well, again, that's why, I think maintaining our constitutional right of our spiritual practice is central to this, and I love that we can bridge that gap with Sanctuary.
Hey, listen, how do people reach you, Eric?
You can email through the Sanctuary website. That's Sanctuary with a P, as in psilocybin. My wife and I also host the Psilocybin Says podcast. We've got a .com for that. You can message us through there. I'm on all the social medias, Eric Osborne, or on Instagram, I am Spore Spreader. So
that's unique, man. Hey, this has been great, Eric. I really, really appreciate the time you took, and I'm excited for this episode to post and hear the feedback from people. So, again, we're heading into the holidays. I know when this posts, it'll be probably March, but happy holidays, you and your family, and be safe. And I look forward to our paths crossing down the road, man.